After 2 seasons, owner Dick Monfort tried everything to revitalize this organization and this team and this fan base. And after unsuccessfully moving this team into the Rocky Mountains, well, the fan base grew very tired. Well, they started not to show up for games. I mean, just look around the stadium. I mean, there were no fans there to see their Rockies play. And it hurt pretty badly that, the Rockies were moved out of the heart of downtown and pretty much into the mountains where it's a long commute just to see a baseball game. Nobody wants to do that. So, after a couple of seasons, including the worst season in franchise history and the second worst record in the MLB, Monfort decided to list the team up for sale. This ended a very long-awaited period here, as a lot of fans were calling for this probably since the early 2010s, and now it's finally happened. Well, an investment group out of Denver decided to snag up the opportunity and take over ownership of this team. Now, the only stipulation was to keep the team in Colorado. That was the one contingency. So then this new ownership said, let's go back in time. Back to the Denver Bears. This was a team that started originally in the early 1900s and played in the Western League, a minor league affiliation, and ended up playing for about 50 seasons. And they actually were pretty successful at the minor league level. I mean, they won titles in 1900, 1911, 1912, 1913, and 1952 before eventually being relocated, and they obviously don't exist anymore. But how about putting that Denver name back on a baseball team? You already have the Nuggets. You already have the Broncos. How about the Denver Bears baseball team? Now, this ownership group has 2 criteria for the new GM. I guess it's the same GM. Build around Muhammad Willingham and make him the star of the organization. This team needs a future star to build around, and this new ownership group believes in Willingham. And then the second guy is Brian Rocchio, a guy that's coming up in the organization. They think he can be the next Derek Jeter. He's good defensively. He's only 20 years old, and he also can hit pretty well. He's got that Jeter-esque leadership skill as well. And then this ownership group decided to put up their own money and build an entirely new stadium right back in the heart of downtown Denver, next to Coors Field. And this is where we resume our journey back in the city of Denver and looking at the new modern Denver Bears now at the major league level. This is going to be a lot of fun. Now, this ownership group also wants to bring the fans back into the stadium. So let's rebrand this team and give them a fresh new logo. And let's not be stingy with our money going into the offseason. Let me introduce you to the new Denver Bears. Yo, what's good, YouTube? This is Jay from TNJ, and welcome to the offseason and the new Denver Bears. The Colorado Rockies have just not seen success the last 2 seasons, and it's time for a change. Now, getting into the offseason, first off, we want to recap what we just saw last year. How about the Milwaukee Brewers defeating the Yankees in the World Series? They go on to win their first championship in I think the first championship ever in their history since they've been in the NL. So that's a pretty big feat for them. Congratulations. And then just looking at the awards around the league, we had no players on the Rockies end up getting an award. And I guess that's a new way to kick in this new era. No more of this, no more of the terrible Rockies. It's now time to officially get into this rebuild and start competing right now. Now, we do have a few retirements, but they're kind of lower guys that retire due to ability. But Matt Kemp finally does retire. He was a Rocky for part of the last couple of years. And then looking around the league, we do have 2 Hall of Fame inductees who retired. That's Albert Pujols and Robinson Cano. Congratulations to them. So now here we go. The first off season as the Denver Bears. Now, this new ownership group wants to bring in some new faces They get rid of Bud Black as the manager, and they try to bring in Sandy Alomar Jr., a former baseball player. Obviously, if you were a fan back in, the 90s, early 2000s, you know who Sandy Alomar is. And I am very, very excited to bring him in as the manager if he does accept that offer. So let's just see what we can do here in free agency. We have about $112 million in budget, but a lot of that is going to have to go towards renewing contracts and arbitration as well, so we have to be careful with that. But we definitely want to bring in what our ownership group says now, a top-tier free agent and a middle-tier free agent. So we'll be on the lookout for those guys when free agency comes around. Now, unfortunately, Sandy Alomar Jr., I don't know why I'm saying Almara, but Sandy Alomar Jr. ends up actually accepting the offer for the Pirates. So it was kind of interesting to see that, that we had a offer put out for Sandy Alomar, and then he ends up going to the worst team in baseball, who are the Pittsburgh Pirates. They actually have a pretty good rebuild going with them. I mean, they had 2 straight number 1 draft picks, but they have some pretty good budget to work with, and they have some pretty good young guys that they have been going through and grooming as well. Now let's hop into free agency, and here are the top free agents this year. I definitely want to go after a pretty good pitcher. I think that's going to be my goal here. I definitely have debated about what I want to do, but I want to still go with the youth movement that we have going in the organization. Kind of grooming around our young guys like Hito Takahashi, like Zach Veen, like Will Benson, all of those guys that are coming up. And I didn't even mention the infielders like Brian Rockies, Ryan Valade, Zion Storm, all those guys coming up. I still want them to have the chance to eventually be the future of this organization. So I won't offer any long-term deals for any fielders, really. It'll just be for pitching. Now, here are the top free agents. There are a lot of them. And a couple of guys I want to highlight here. How about Aaron Judge? Now, it would be interesting to pull in Aaron Judge, but he is 30 years old at this point. And looking at last year, he hit 275 and 383 on base percentage. He's always going to have a high on base percentage. He is a very good player, a very good fielder. Now, I highly debated going after Byron Buxton. I mean, at 29 years old, in the show, though, he doesn't really hit for very high average. I'm very surprised at this. He hit 272 and 265 in his 2 years that we have in this franchise. And I was expecting him to hit a little better, but he is an excellent fielder. He would be a game changer for our defense because, remember, we finished last in fielding percentage a year ago. So that would be a pretty huge, significant upgrade for our outfield. Then there's Joey Gallo, who is an excellent fielder. I never noticed that, man. He is 94, 99, 99, 99, all in his fielding attributes. That is just ridiculous. But the guy is just going to strike out a whole lot. He's not going to hit for high average. So I definitely am going to pass on that. Now, Tim Anderson is not a top-tier free agent, but I'd say he's like a middle-tier free agent. But in the show, he's not hitting that well. In real life, he had back-to-back 300 seasons. And then when he came to the show, he hit around 260 or so. I also thought about going after Dansby Swanson. He is a very good defensive shortstop, and I think that he would help with that fielding percentage right away. But then all signs point to the top free agent, Luis Severino. Now, he is awesome. I love Severino. He is 89 overall. He's 28 years old. Him and German Marquez are going to be the same age. And Marquez is going on the last year of his contract. I have no idea if he will re-up with us. But I decide to go after a top-tier pitcher here in Severino. And I want to make this deal sweet enough that he cannot turn it down. So I'm going to give him more than what he wants. He's asking for 26.2. I'm going to up that and make sure that he comes and make sure that he is comfortable and happy in Denver. So I decide to up that up to $28 million a year. I decide to go back after Michael Givens. Now, Givens had a very good bounce back year for us. And remember, in season number 1, he had a terrible season. And then he had a good bounce back year. He had around a 118 whip. So I definitely decide to offer him a 1-year deal. Kind of undercut him a little bit, but it's because, I kind of want a good deal and make sure we have money to sign the rest of our roster. I then decide to go after Scott Alexander. He's an older relief pitcher, 32 years old, but there are not a lot of young relief pitchers right now in free agency, so he's kind of our best option. He's actually a guy that's a pretty good relief guy. You look at his stats, I mean, he's actually pretty good. Then I decide to go after our middle tier free agent who the ownership group wants us to go after. And I'm looking at Gary Sanchez. That's a position catcher that we have definitely not done well at. You know, Elias Diaz had a pretty good season one. He hit about 290, but that was in a platoon season. And I'm just thinking, you know, Gary Sanchez is a guy that's been pretty inconsistent, especially with that average. His on-base percentage is good, but I think that average kind of warrants him to have kind of a one-year deal, kind of a prove-it deal to really see what he has. So I decided to offer him a one-year, $14 million deal. Now, our infield is interesting. You know, we moved Garrett Hampson out to center field, and I think we kind of have a hole right now at second base. But I'm still on the fence about what I want to do with Brendan Rodgers. I still want to kind of give him the opportunity, but I do want him to win the job. So I might want to bring in a veteran infielder to see if, you know, they can beat out Rodgers. But we still have Brian Rocchio, who the ownership group wants to build around. But is he ready right now? I think time will tell. I think spring training will tell. At 74 overall, I think that's good enough to be at the major league level. But do I want to hurt his development? So I decide to go after Ronald Odor. I think he is a guy that's not going to hit for a high average, obviously, but he's going to bring that much needed power that we need to the lineup. Remember last year, we finished bottom 5 in home runs. We finished last in on-base percentage. We finished second and last in average. So I want a guy that's going to, you know, give us a different bat in our lineup, and I think Odor will do that. So I'll offer him a 2-year contract and see where it goes with him. So Luis Severino doesn't waste any time. I literally advance one day, and he commits to that contract. A $28 million a year for the next 5 years. We finally have our ace. Odor actually commits right away as well. So we're going to have him through his younger 30s here. And I love that because he won't always be the second baseman. He can play third base as well. He will also give us a nice platoon option if it comes to that. Wilson Contreras, who was the top catcher, he signs with the Braves on a $22 million deal at age 30. Aaron Judge goes to the LA Angels. I'm surprised at that because the Angels just ended up trading Shohei Ohtani last season at the trade deadline, and then they end up signing Judge. That's just an interesting move. Jose Ramirez, the top free agent, ends up signing with the Twins, and he gets $31 million a year. And with our deal with Severino, we are going to lose a draft pick. I'm hoping that it's not that number 2 pick, but I'm not sure how the game handles that because in real life, I believe it's like you don't lose your first round pick. You lose like a second or third or something like that. But in the show, I don't know if they take away your first round pick or your second. I don't know how that works. To me, I think it's worth it because, you know, I think the blue chip prospect, I think we hit gold with Willingham. So I'm ready to build with the guys that we have right now that are young. I don't think it's a truly big deal if we do end up losing that number 2 pick. It's not like that guy's going to come in and contribute right away. It's definitely down the road. So then we advance on in free agency, and I see that Gary Sanchez has some suitors. So I decide to extend that to 2 years, $14 million, instead of just 1 year, $14 million, and see if he commits to that instead. So Brandon Lowe ends up going to the Washington Nationals on a pretty good deal. And then we find out that Gary Sanchez does commit to the Bears. I love this signing. It gives us a pretty good bat. And I think that, you know, he could hit number 3. I'm interested to see what Charlie Blackmon's going to do. He's going to hit in that 3 spot once again. But he's on the last year of his deal, $18 million, and he is declining pretty quickly. Joey Gallo goes to the Marlins on a 6-year, $118 million deal. That is a sizable deal for him. Byron Buxton is actually fielding offers at this point, and the Marlins are actually the top team. So the Marlins look like they are going to be very, very aggressive in free agency. Then there are some other guys still on the board, including Maikel Franco. But the thing about going after some of these guys is that we just do not have the money to sign them now. We went after a few guys. Unfortunately, we have about, $41 million left to spend, not even that. And we still have to kind of go after our own guys as well. We've tendered contracts, but not any have been accepted yet. And then we have the arbitration deals as well. So we don't have too much money to work with at this point. So then we decided to go after some cheaper deals here. Mike Leake, I'm going to bring him back. He had a very good year. He's age 35. I'm not banking on him to be a starter per se, but a spot starter. I mean, he had a good year, so why not get him on a one-year deal, get the last year probably of his career leaked out of him, and no pun intended there, and see if we can just squeeze some wins or even some good bullpen innings out of him at the end of his career. So I decided to once again kind of bolster our bullpen, and I decided to go after Scott Oberg. And Scott Oberg, remember, was with us in season 1. We traded him, and I want to bring him back. We traded him for, I believe it was Miguel Andujar, and he's not bad of a pitcher. He's not too bad. I mean, I just need to figure out closer. I just cannot figure out the position, and I don't know if Oberg is going to be the closer, but I could give him another shot. We'll have to see how he does. But if anything, he will be a nice bullpen guy at age 32 and 33. Dansby Swanson ends up signing a $13 million deal to be the shortstop of the Houston Astros. So a pretty good deal from them. That's kind of a team-friendly deal, to be honest with you. Ryan Presley goes to the Padres, so they get stronger in their bullpen. That's why we need to sign guys, because our division foes like the Padres and Dodgers are still out here signing guys. Buxton goes to the Mets on a $31 million deal, so congrats to him. Whit Merrifield also goes to the Astros. And then Tim Anderson signs with the Miami Marlins. So they are actually pretty aggressive. They miss out on Buxton, so they decide to go and get Tim Anderson. That's a very good signing for them. $10 million a year over the next 5 years. And then JD Martinez signs just a 1-year contract with the Yankees. I believe the Yankees were a late bid in for Buxton. They miss out on him, so they decide to go after JD Martinez. I'm not sure where Aaron Judge went to the Los Angeles Angels, but I guess they're thinking that, Martinez is going to replace Aaron Judge. I'm not sure about that one, but we'll have to see how Martinez does. He's an excellent player nonetheless, but, I think they needed a good defensive outfielder. I'm not sure that, you get that with JD Martinez. So we move on to the Rule 5 draft, and honestly, at this point, we removed Brian Sammons from our 40-man roster to pick up another guy, because Sammons we picked up in the Rule 5 draft last year. And I thought about going after a veteran outfielder, and it kind of makes sense, because should we bank on our young guys coming up in the organization? I say yes. I mean, we still need to rebuild with the players we have within and not go all out on free agency. We just need to rebuild here. So I decided to go after a veteran relief guy out of the pen. Definitely a issue with us last year was bullpen help. We had a couple of guys like Jacob Junis, like Carlos Estevez, who did pretty well, and also Michael Givens. But now we kind of have to, kind of retool our bullpen. There's no rebuilding a bullpen. You just kind of have to retool it. And I think that going after a guy like Nick Goody makes a lot of sense. He is 30 years old. He's making about $1.8 million. So we decided to sign him, and hopefully, he will bring some pretty good bullpen plays, a good arm out of the bullpen, and help us this season. So after free agency, we are definitely up against it. We literally spent all of our budget, and we are at about $477,000 in yearly surplus. I mean, that is spending every single penny that you have. You can see the contracts here. I kind of like how, well balanced our budget is. We kind of have a good balance of going after relief pitchers, starting pitching, and we kind of leave that room to kind of re-sign guys in the future as well if we really need to. And some guys that are going to contribute early are still on cheaper deals, like Josh Fuentes. He's making about $1 million. And then, a guy like Will Benson, he's making like $100,000. I mean, and he's a guy that's going to contribute right now. But I do want to shed a little bit of contract just to make some room, just in case we make some trades or whatever in the mid-season. And I look at Buster Posey, and man, he just had a disappointing year. He was at about 300 on base percentage, but the average was down to 218, and he makes about $8 million this year. I mean, he is one of our highest contracts on the squad, and I just don't see a need for him anymore now that we signed Gary Sanchez to a 2-year deal. And I'm going to try to get just a prospect back for him, and I'm going to trade him to a team that is a contender, at least for this season. He has a 1-year deal. So I look at Jack Ramiro, but they don't really need a catcher. So I decide to go back to the trade finder and find somebody else. And I settle on the Red Sox here. Vincent Jang is a potential closing pitcher prospect, and he's pretty good. And he's actually a generated guy, so I'm actually going to rename him to one of you guys. And that's what I like to do if I do end up trading for one of these, like, SEA generated guys that the game just puts in here. I like to rename them to my subscribers, and that's how I will do it if I do end up picking up guys like that in the future. So here is our projected starting lineup. Charlie Blackmon right now is going to hit number 3, but man, he is declining. He's at 75 overall now. Just remember, when we started the season last year, he was at 84 overall as a left fielder. Now he's 75. Will Benson, it's his time. He gets to start in right field now to start the season. I really, really love what he's doing. Gary Sanchez at number 6 in the lineup. I like this, having like a lefty-righty right in the middle of our lineup. I kind of like that kind of vibe there. I like just switching it up. I like having, a power-hitting guy at number 5 that can drive in runs. I think Will Benson can do that. But watch out for Gary Sanchez. He could move up in the lineup. I could eventually move Jose Iglesias to the leadoff spot. I'm not really sure. But one thing that worries me about this lineup is that we don't have a ton of speed. Hampson's obviously fast, but nobody else really is, a guy that can run the bases really well. So our projected starting rotation will probably be this. Severino, Marquez, John Gray, Derek Rodriguez, and Ramel Coffer. I really like, that we have one lefty in the rotation. I obviously want to keep it that way. And we have Scott Alexander out of the bullpen, but we only have 2 lefties at the MLB level right now. I might make a move to get one more lefty just for depth, and we'll have to see how that goes, but I think that's how we're going to look right now. Now let's just talk about some guys that may have a spot at the MLB level this year. The first is Hito Takahashi. He is very, very good. Jonathan Champion ended up getting the player of the year in our organization, so he actually got the +5 potential boost. Zach Veen could make his debut this year. He actually was offensive player of the year in our organization. He got the +3 in potential, but I think I might develop him just a little bit more. And then Justin Maxwell, who was a second round draft pick in our first year's player draft in season 1, he ends up getting pitcher of the year. Now this season, I definitely decided to do something different. I decided to give player of the year boost in other organizations as well, so they got a +5 in potential. Justin Vargas, who was one of the top prospects in baseball, he was a number 1 overall pick last year. He gets the best player of the year in the Pirates organization. Then in our division, I decided to give it to Marco Luciano for the Giants. He is a 20-year-old shortstop. Watch out for the Giants in their rebuild. They are actually doing a pretty good job of developing guys as well. And then for the Dodgers, Julio Serrano, who is a 24-year-old pitcher, a little older, but he had a fantastic year. I believe he went 18 and 14 or something like that. He started 34 games, but he had below a 1 whip. It was awesome. And then Yusuke Kano is going to get player of the year for the Diamondbacks, but he could have a chance at the show this year. I'm excited to see what our division is going to do, and I want to see the shift in our division as well. See the Diamondbacks start competing, and the Giants and us as well. So that's going to be interesting to see in this series. So that's going to do it here in the offseason. Let me know what you guys think. I tried to spend all of the money, and we did that. We were literally up against it. We have about $4 million now in surplus now that we traded Buster Posey, and then we actually signed Martin Maldonado in free agency just to a 1-year deal. I want kind of a year or two to develop Rafael Marchand. He is still a developing catcher. But just looking at our team rankings here, we are now into the top 20 with our starting pitching and our bullpen, so I'm happy about that. And also, you know, it's kind of surprising that Jose Iglesias and Blackman are ranked 24th and 23rd in the MLB, and they were our last two All-Stars. That's pretty funny. And then Fuentes is right now ranked the number 23 third baseman in baseball. But every other position, we are now in the top 20, which I'm very excited about. Obviously, we weren't going to go straight to the top 10 with every position, but I do want to embrace this rebuild and compete this year. I know we probably don't have the roster of the Dodgers or the Padres, but I definitely want to be competitive right now. So that's going to do it here. I hope you guys enjoyed the offseason and look forward to this new season with the new Denver Bears. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Hit subscribe, hit that like button. Stay tuned. Let's get it. Let's go.
I like getting money, I got time to get it. Target on me, so my car's a tenant. Dancing with the devil, I don't bargain with it. Bobbing in the dash, and the stick is with it. And I hit the 4-5 on the west side. But I'm from the east side, this how we slide. This how we ride, yeah.